Everett Blackwood, a successful 40-year-old financial advisor, was known for his charming smile and his ability to put clients at ease. His wife, Imogen, 35, balanced her role as a part-time yoga instructor with being a devoted mother to their neighbors and friends. The Blackwoods epitomized the perfect family, but as with many picture-perfect facades, cracks began to form beneath the surface. The pressure to maintain their image of familial harmony had started to take its toll. Everett's long hours at the office and frequent business trips created a growing distance between him and Imogen. Meanwhile, Imogen found herself increasingly overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood and her part-time career. As summer approached, the Blackwoods faced a new challenge. Imogen's yoga classes were becoming more popular, and she was offered the opportunity to lead a teacher training program the couple realized they needed help with. Child care to maintain their busy schedules and keep their family life running smoothly. Little did they know that their decision to hire a babysitter would set in motion a chain of events that would shatter their seemingly perfect world and leave their community reeling in shock. Daisy Summers was not what one would typically expect of a seasoned babysitter. At 18, she was a recent high school graduate with dreams of becoming a renowned photographer. Her portfolio was filled with moody black and white portraits and vibrant scenes that hinted at a talent beyond her years. Born to working-class parents in the neighboring town of Mill Creek, Daisy had always felt like an outsider among her peers. Her artistic sensibilities and quiet demeanor set her apart from the sports-obsessed culture of her high school. She saw babysitting as a means to an end, a way to save money for her planned gap year in Europe before starting art school. Daisy's aunt, who lived in Oak Ridge Heights, had mentioned to Imogen that her niece was looking for summer work. Intrigued by the idea of having a creative influence around her children, Imogen invited Daisy for an interview. From the moment Daisy stepped into the Blackwood home, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Her long hair fell in waves around her heart-shaped face, and her deep eyes seemed to take in every detail of her surroundings. Everett, who happened to be working from home that day, found himself strangely drawn to the young woman's presence. During the interview, Daisy's quiet confidence and genuine interest in the children impressed Imogen. She spoke of her love for art and how she hoped to incorporate creative activities into her time with Phoebe and Jasper. Imogen was sold and Daisy was hired on the spot. The first few weeks seemed to go smoothly. Daisy quickly became a favorite with the children, who were enchanted by her storytelling and art projects. Imogen relished the freedom to focus on her yoga career, knowing her kids were in capable hands. Everett, too, seemed more relaxed. He started coming home earlier, often timing his arrival to coincide with Daisy's presence. He would engage her in conversations about her photography, showing a level of interest that he rarely displayed towards Imogen's pursuits. At first, Imogen was pleased to see her husband taking an interest in their babysitter's life. She even encouraged Daisy to show Everett her portfolio, hoping his business connections might prove useful for the young artist's future. But as the summer wore on, subtle changes began to occur, lingering glances, an increasing number of accidental encounters, and a growing tension in the air when Everett and Daisy were in the same room. Slowly, imperceptibly, the dynamics within the Blackwood household began to shift, setting the stage for a tragedy that would soon unfold. As July turned to August, Imogen Blackwood found herself increasingly uneasy in her own home. At first, she couldn't quite put her finger on what was bothering her. Everything seemed to be running smoothly. The children were happy, her yoga classes were thriving, and Everett appeared more engaged with family life than he had been in months. Yet there was something in the air, a tension that she couldn't shake. It started with small observations, Everett lingering in the kitchen when Daisy was preparing snacks for the kids, or the way his eyes would follow the young babysitter as she moved around the house. Imogen tried to dismiss these thoughts, attributing them to her own insecurities. After all, Everett had always been a flirt, and his charm was part of what had attracted her to him in the first place. But as the days passed, she couldn't help but notice more. There was the time she came home early from a yoga class to find Everett and Daisy in deep conversation, their heads close together as they looked at something on Daisy's phone. They had sprung apart when Imogen entered Daisy mumbling something about showing Everett her latest photographs. Then there were the changes in Everett himself. He had started paying more attention to his appearance, wearing cologne even on weekends and buying new clothes. When Imogen complimented him, he brushed it off, saying he just felt like a change. One evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Imogen casually mentioned that Daisy had seemed distracted lately. Everett's response was oddly defensive, quickly changing the subject to his upcoming business trip. The seed of doubt, once planted, began to grow. Imogen found herself paying closer attention to the interactions between her husband and the babysitter. She noticed how Daisy's cheeks would flush when Everett entered a room, the way her laugh seemed to linger a bit too long at his jokes. She saw, however, it would find excuses to be home when Daisy was there, claiming he needed to pick up documents or had forgotten his laptop. As her suspicions grew, Imogen's behavior began to change. She became more irritable with the children, snapping at them for small infractions. Her yoga students noticed a shift in her teaching style, commenting on her lack of focus and shortened meditation sessions. At night, Imogen lay awake, her mind racing with possibilities. Was she imagining things? Was she letting her own insecurities always in her marriage? Or was there really something going on between Everett and Daisy? She tried to rationalize her thoughts. Daisy was barely out of high school, and Everett was a responsible father and respected professional. Surely he wouldn't risk everything for a fling with a teenager. And yet the doubts persisted. Imogen considered confronting Everett, but feared what his reaction might reveal. Instead, she began to watch and wait, gathering mental notes of every interaction, every glance, every moment that seemed out of place. The weight of her suspicions pressed down on her, transforming the once peaceful Blackwood home into a pressure cooker of unspoken tensions and simmering emotions. Little did Imogen know that her worst fears were about to be confirmed, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to an unthinkable tragedy. As summer reached its peak, the connection between Everett Blackwood and Daisy Summers deepened, fueled by stolen moments and shared secrets. For Everett, Daisy represented a breath of fresh air in his carefully controlled life. Her youthful energy and artistic passion awakened something in him that he thought had long been dormant. It began innocently enough. Everett would arrive home early, ostensibly to spend time with his children, but increasingly he found himself engaging Daisy in conversation. They would discuss her photography, her dreams of traveling the world, and her unique perspective on life. Everett found himself captivated by her views, so different from the pragmatic world of finance he inhabited. Daisy, for her part, was drawn to Everett's worldliness and success. He represented everything she aspired to: confidence, financial security, and a life beyond the confines of her small-town upbringing. When he spoke about his work or his travels, she hung on every word, imagining herself in the glamorous world he described. Their conversations grew longer and more intimate. Everett began sharing his own unfulfilled dreams of writing a novel, of leaving the corporate world behind. Daisy listened with rapt attention, offering encouragement and understanding that he felt had been lacking in his marriage. As their emotional connection deepened, physical tension began to build. Accidental touches lingered a moment too long. Eye contact became charged with unspoken desire. They found excuses to be in the same room, their bodies gravitating towards each other, even as they maintained a respectable distance. Everett knew what he was doing was wrong. He was a married man, a father, and Daisy was young enough to be his daughter. He tried to rationalize his feelings, telling himself it was just a harmless flirtation, a midlife crisis that would pass. But in quiet moments, when he lay awake next to a sleeping Imogen, he couldn't deny the growing intensity of his feelings for Daisy. Daisy, too, was conflicted. She had always prided herself on her maturity and independence, but now she found herself falling for a married man. She knew it was cliché, the babysitter and the dad, but she couldn't help the rush of excitement she felt every time Everett walked into the room. She told herself it was just a crush, that nothing would ever happen. But deep down, she longed for more. Their growing connection did not go unnoticed. The children, Phoebe and Jasper, picked up on the change in dynamics. They saw how their father's eyes would light up when Daisy arrived, how he would laugh more freely in her presence. Phoebe, perceptive beyond her years, once asked her mother why Daddy smiled differently at Daisy. Imogen had brushed off the question, but it added to her growing unease. As August wore on, Everett and Daisy's flirtation intensified. They began to manufacture reasons to be alone together. Everett would offer to drive Daisy home, taking the long road and parking in secluded spots to continue their conversations. Daisy would stay late after the children were in bed, claiming she was helping to tidy up but really waiting for a moment alone with Everett. One evening, as they stood in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed, The tension between them reached a breaking point. Everett reached out to brush a strand of hair from Daisy's face, his hand lingering on her cheek. Daisy leaned into his touch, her heart racing. For a moment they stood frozen, teetering on the edge of a line they both knew they shouldn't cross. It was Imogen's voice calling from upstairs that broke the spell. Everett and Daisy sprang apart, guilt and desire warring on their faces. As Daisy hurriedly gathered her things to leave, they exchanged a look that said more than words ever could. They both knew that whatever was happening between them had gone too far to ignore. The pivotal moment came on a sweltering day in late August. Imogen had taken the children to visit her parents for the weekend, leaving Everett alone in the house. He had told her he needed to catch up on work, but in reality, he had other plans. Daisy arrived under the pretense of picking up some art supplies she had left behind. The air was thick with anticipation as Everett invited her inside. They stood in the foyer, the tension between them palpable. Then, as if drawn by an invisible force, they came together in a passionate embrace. Their first kiss was electric, years of pent-up desire and forbidden longing pouring out in a single moment. Everett's hands tangled in Daisy's hair as she pressed herself against him, all thoughts of propriety and consequences forgotten in the heat of the moment. What followed was a whirlwind of passion and guilt. They made love frantically, desperately, as if trying to make up for lost time. Afterwards, lying tangled in the sheets of the guest bedroom, neither could bring themselves to use the marital bed. Reality began to set in. Everett was consumed by conflicting emotions, the exhilaration of new love, warred with the crushing weight of guilt. He thought of Imogen, of their children, of the life they had built together. But when he looked at Daisy, her youthful beauty glowing in the afternoon light, he felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. Daisy, for her part, was overwhelmed by the intensity of her feelings. She had never experienced anything like this before. The thrill of being with an older, experienced man was intoxicating, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was betraying Imogen, who had always been kind to her. Despite their misgivings, neither Everett nor Daisy could bring themselves to end the affair. They began to meet in secret, stealing moments whenever they could. A quick kiss in the laundry room while Imogen was upstairs with the children's hushed phone calls late at night, clandestine meetings and out-of-the-way cafes where they were unlikely to be recognized. The risk of discovery only added to the excitement. Every shared glance, every brush of hands when passing in the hallway was charged with secret meaning. They developed a code, innocuous phrases that held hidden significance. When Daisy mentioned a new photography project, it was a signal that she wanted to meet. Whenever I talked about a challenging client, it meant he couldn't get away. As their affair deepened, both Everett and Daisy began to fantasize about a future together. Ever imagined leaving Imogen, starting a new life with Daisy by his side? He pictured introducing her to his colleagues as his partner, watching her photography career blossom with his support. Daisy dreamed of traveling the world with Everett, of gallery openings where he would proudly stand by her side. But these fantasies were always tempered by the harsh light of reality. Everett knew that leaving his family would devastate his children and potentially ruin his career. Daisy, in her more lucid moments, recognized the naivety of her dreams. She was barely out of high school, with her whole life ahead of her. Was she really ready to become a stepmother, to deal with the fallout of a messy divorce? Still, they persisted in their affair, each encounter leaving them craving more. They became reckless, taking greater risks to be together. Everett began to invent business trips, booking into local hotels where Daisy would meet him. Daisy lied to her parents about where she was spending her nights, creating elaborate cover stories to hide her true whereabouts. The strain began to show in other areas of their lives. Everett's work suffered as he spent more and more time orchestrating his meetings with Daisy. He became distracted in meetings, missed deadlines, and his once stellar reputation began to tarnish. Daisy's plans for her gap year fell by the wayside as she focused all her energy on her relationship with Everett. Her photography, once her passion, became a distant second to the all-consuming nature of their affair. As summer began to wane, Everett and Daisy's relationship intensified. They became more daring, more desperate in their encounters. The thrill of secrecy was wearing off, replaced by a knowing desire to be together openly. Neither of them realized that their carefully constructed web of lies was about to unravel, with consequences more dire than either could have imagined. As autumn leaves began to fall, Imogen Blackwood's suspicions reached a fever pitch. The nagging doubt that had plagued her all summer had crystallized into a cold, hard certainty. Something was definitely going on between her husband and the babysitter. Determined to uncover the truth, Imogen embarked on a covert investigation. She began by scrutinizing Everett's behavior more closely. She noted the late nights at the office, the sudden business trips, the hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when she entered the room. Each observation was a piece in a puzzle she was terrified to complete. Imogen's first concrete step was to check Everett's phone records. She waited until he was in the shower one morning, then quickly scrolled through his call history. Her heart sank as she saw Daisy's number appearing with alarming frequency, often late at night or early in the morning. Next, she turned her attention to Everett's computer. She felt a twinge of guilt as she opened his laptop, but her need to know overpowered her scruples. It didn't take long to find what she was looking for in Everett's email. She discovered a trail of messages between him and Daisy, thinly veiled under the guise of discussing her photography portfolio. The language was carefully neutral, but Imogen could read between the lines. References to meetings and private critiques made her stomach churn as her investigation deepened Imogen and found herself transforming into someone she barely recognized. She installed a hidden camera in the living room, justifying it as necessary to protect her family. She began following Everett, parking down the street from his office and watching who came and went. She even considered hiring a private investigator, but couldn't bring herself to involve an outsider in her family's oil. The emotional toll of her sleuthing was immense. Imogen's yoga classes suffered as she struggled to maintain her calm, centered persona while her inner world was in chaos. She found herself snapping at the children more often than drowning in guilt over her short temper. Sleep became elusive, her nights filled with vivid nightmares of Everett and Daisy together. Despite the mounting evidence, a small part of Imogen still clung to the hope that she was misinterpreting everything. Perhaps Everett was just mentoring Daisy, taking a fatherly interest in her career, but deep down she knew this was wishful thinking. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Imogen had told Everett she would be teaching a workshop all day, but in reality she had canceled her classes to follow him. She watched from her car as Everett met Daisy at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Through the window she saw them holding hands across the table, their faces close together and intimate conversation. As tears blurred her vision, Imogen realized that her worst fears had been confirmed. The life she had built, the family she cherished, was built on a foundation of lies. In that moment, something inside her hardened. The hurt and betrayal crystallized into a cold, implacable resolve. Wiping away her tears, Imogen started the car and drove home, her mind racing with possibilities. She now had all the evidence she needed. The question was, what was she going to do with it? That evening, as Everett returned home, the tension in the air was palpable. Imogen sat at the kitchen table, a glass of red wine in front of her, her face a mask of calm that belied the storm raging within. As Everett hung up his coat, she spoke, her voice eerily controlled. "Everett, we need to talk about Daisy." The color drained from Everett's face, but he quickly composed himself. He forced a casual tone as he asked what she meant. Imogen's eyes narrowed as she laid out her evidence. The phone records, the emails, the clandestine meetings. With each revelation, Everett's denials grew weaker, more desperate. He tried to gaslight her, accusing her of paranoia and invading his privacy. But Imogen stood firm, her voice rising as she described what she had seen at the cafe. Everett's facade crumbled, replaced by a mixture of guilt and defiance. "You don't understand, Imogen, Daisy and we have a connection. She sees me in a way you haven't in years." Imogen's carefully maintained composure shattered. She lashed out, hurling accusations and insults. How could he betray their family? What about their children? Did their years together mean nothing? Everett's response is swung between remorse and justification. He spoke of feeling trapped, of rediscovering passion with Daisy. He claimed he still loved Imogen, that he never meant to hurt her, but his words rang hollow in the face of his actions. As the argument escalated, neither noticed Phoebe standing in the doorway, wide-eyed and trembling. It was only when she burst into tears that her parents realized she was there. The sight of their daughter's distress momentarily united them as they rushed to comfort her. In the aftermath of the confrontation, An uneasy truce settled over the Blackwood household. Everett promised to end things with Daisy to recommit to their marriage. Imogen, exhausted and emotionally drained, agreed to try and work things out for the sake of their children. But as they lay in bed that night, a chasm between them both knew that things would never be the same. The trust that had been the foundation of their marriage was irreparably damaged. And unbeknownst to Everett, the seeds of a far darker plan were already taking root in Imogen's mind. In the days following the confrontation, a suffocating tension permeated every corner of the Blackwood home. Everett and Imogen moved around each other like wary strangers, their interactions stilted and formal. The children, picking up on the undercurrent of hostility, became clingy and irritable. Imogen watched Everett like a hawk, noting every phone call, every late night at the office. She vacillated between bitter anger and desperate hope, clinging to Everett's promises to recommit to their family. But deep down, a part of her knew it was too late. The damage had been done, and the idyllic life she had worked so hard to build was crumbling around her. Everett, for his part, found himself torn between guilt and resentment. He tried to focus on his family, to recapture the love he had once felt for Imogen, but thoughts of Daisy continually intruded, her youthful passion a stark contrast to the Cold War at home. Despite his promises, he couldn't bring himself to cut off contact with Daisy completely. The breaking point came on a crisp October evening. Imogen had planned a family dinner, a last-ditch effort to salvage their fractured relationships. She had spent hours cooking Everett's favorite meal, even enlisting the children's help to set the table. But as the hours ticked by and Everett's chair remained empty, her hope turned to ash when Everett finally stumbled through the door well past midnight. The scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. Something an image, and snapped. The carefully constructed facade of forgiveness and reconciliation shattered, revealing the raw, seething fury beneath. The ensuing argument was brutal, years of pent-up resentment and betrayal pouring out in a torrent of accusations and recriminations. Imogen screamed about sacrificing her career for their family, about the years she had spent supporting Everett's ambitions. Everett retaliated by painting Imogen in his controlling and suffocating, claiming she had stifled his dreams and individuality. As their voices rose, so did the stakes of their argument. Everett, pushed to his limit, finally admitted that he was in love with Daisy. The words hung in the air like a death knell for their marriage. Imogen, her world collapsing around her, made a desperate ultimatum. Daisy or his family. Everett's hesitation was all the answer Imogen needed. In that moment, something fundamental changed within her, the last vestiges of the woman. He had been the devoted wife. The loving mother withered away, replaced by a cold, implacable resolve. As Everett continued to talk, making promises they both knew he wouldn't keep, Imogen retreated into herself. She nodded mechanically, letting him believe he had won her over. But behind her eyes, a plan was forming, a dark, twisted path that would lead to unimaginable tragedy. That night, as Everett slept fitfully beside her image and lay awake, her mind racing, she thought about the life she had built, the dreams she had sacrificed, the love she had poured into her family. And she thought about Daisy, the young woman who had so casually destroyed everything. In the cold light of dawn, Imogen made her decision. If she couldn't have the life she had worked so hard for, then neither would Daisy. With the clarity that should have frightened her image and began to plot her revenge, she would make them pay. Everett for his betrayal, Daisy for her youth and beauty, both of them for the happiness they had found in each other's arms. As she finally drifted off to sleep, a small, mirthless smile played on Imogen's lips. They had no idea what was coming, but soon, very soon, they would learn the true cost of their affair. The plan came together with a frightening ease. Imogen moved through the following days in a haze of cold determination, her every action calculated and deliberate. She maintained a facade of normalcy, even managing to convince Everett that she was coming to terms with the situation. On a chilly Saturday morning, Imogen put her plan into motion. She suggested that Everett take the children to visit his parents for the weekend, claiming she needed some time alone to process everything. Relieved by her apparent acceptance, Everett readily agreed. As soon as the car disappeared down the street, Imogen sprang into action. She called Daisy, her voice carefully modulated to sound warm and conciliatory. She invited the young woman over, saying she wanted to clear the air between them. Daisy, caught off guard by the unexpected olive branch, hesitated before accepting. As she made her way to the Blackwood home, a mix of hope and apprehension swirled in her chest. Perhaps, she thought, there was a way to resolve the situation amicably. When Daisy arrived, Imogen greeted her with a brittle smile. She ushered the young woman into the kitchen, where a bottle of wine and 2 glasses waited. As they talked, Imogen's manner was eerily calm. She spoke of forgiveness, of understanding the heart's folly. With each sip of wine, Daisy felt herself relaxing, believing that perhaps everything would work out. It was only when Daisy's vision began to blur that she realized something was terribly wrong. As she struggled to stand, panic rising in her throat, she saw Imogen's mask of friendliness melt away, replaced by a look of cold, implacable hatred. What happened next was a blur of violence and terror. Imogen, driven by a rage that had been building for months, lashed out with a brutality that shocked even herself. The kitchen, once a place of family gatherings and laughter, became the scene of an unthinkable crime. In the aftermath, Imogen stood over Daisy's motionless form, her hands shaking and her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The reality of what she had done crashed over her in waves, each one threatening to drown her in horror and regret. But it was too late to turn back. With a detachment that would later horrify her, Imogen began to clean up the evidence of her crime. She worked methodically, her mind oddly clear as she erased all traces of Daisy's presence from the house. As night fell, Imogen made one final call to the police, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. She reported Daisy missing. She spun a tale of the young woman failing to show up for her babysitting duties, of calls gone unanswered and a gnawing worry in her gut. As she hung up the phone, Imogen caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman who stared back at her was a stranger, hollow-eyed and haunted with blood-stained hands and a soul irreparably damaged by the weight of her actions. In that moment, Imogen realized that in her quest for vengeance, she had destroyed not just Daisy's life, but her own as well. The tragedy she had set in motion would have far-reaching consequences, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. The disappearance of Daisy Summers sent shockwaves through the quiet community of Oak Ridge Heights. As news spread, neighbors gathered in small groups, their hushed conversations a mix of concern and morbid speculation. The Blackwood home, once a symbol of suburban perfection, became the epicenter of a growing storm. As the investigation intensified, cracks began to appear in Imogen's. Carefully constructed alibi surveillance footage from a nearby gas station contradicted her account of her movements on the day of Daisy's disappearance. Inconsistencies in her statements raised red flags for the seasoned detectives working the case. The breakthrough came when a hiker discovered Daisy's phone in a wooded area on the outskirts of town. The device, while damaged, yielded a treasure trove of information, including text messages that painted a clear picture of her relationship with Everett. With this new evidence, the focus of the investigation shifted dramatically. Everett found himself the prime suspect, his infidelity seen as a possible motive for Daisy's disappearance. As he was brought in for questioning, the carefully constructed life of the Blackwood family began to crumble once and for all. Little did the investigators know that the true culprit was hiding in plain sight, her guilt eating away at her with each passing day. The tragedy that had befallen Daisy Summers was far from over, its repercussions continuing to ripple through the lives of all involved. The trial that followed was a media sensation, laying bare the dark undercurrents that had run beneath the surface of the Blackwood's seemingly perfect life. Imogen was sentenced to life in prison, her fall from grace complete. Everett, while cleared of direct involvement in Days, saw his reputation and career destroyed by the scandal. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.